Amelia Jordan stepped off the bus at 6:45 a.m., heart pounding with anticipation and a touch of nerves. The late summer sun had just begun to cast a pale gold over the strip mall, where the Midwest Fresh supermarket stood, its beige brick facade unremarkable, its sliding glass doors tinted a dull green. Clutching her neatly folded uniform, Amelia took a deep breath, brushing a stray curl from her forehead. She straightened the crisp navy vest in her hands and reminded herself this job was her chance to prove she belonged anywhere she chose. Inside, the store buzzed with pre-opening activity. Shelves were stocked, carts lined up, and a trio of white employees, two men and a woman, joked quietly by the deli counter. Their laughter stopped when Amelia walked past. The woman, Margot, flicked her eyes subtly, as if noting Amelia's darker skin and thoughtful smile. She gave a tight nod before turning back to her colleagues. The men murmured greetings, muted, obligatory. Amelia returned their nods with polite confidence, though her pulse threatened to betray her. Her manager for the morning, Dan Miller, a balding man in his mid-40s, handed her a name tag and pointed to Register 5, the one closest to the bakery display. "You're on your own after a quick orientation," he said brusquely. His eyes skimmed over her as though he calculated her usefulness in seconds. She swallowed any trepidation and marched to her station. Dan spent a scant 5 minutes running through the register basics. Scan the barcode, bag the items, take payment. If anything goes wrong, call me. Got it? His tone offered no encouragement. Amelia nodded, her voice steady. Got it. The store's open sign flicked on, and the first customer of the day approached. A middle-aged white man with a designer coffee cup in hand. "Morning," he grunted, tossing an energy drink and a loaf of bread onto the conveyor. Amelia smiled and greeted him warmly. She scanned the items, bagged them carefully, and took his credit card. When she handed the receipt back, he frowned. "You're kind of slow, aren't you?" he muttered, rolling his eyes as he walked away without grace. Amelia's cheeks flushed. She bit her lip, unwilling to let his remarks slip into her voice. Instead, she reminded herself that kindness and competence often speak louder than impatience. With a deep exhale, she adjusted her posture and smiled at the next customer, a young white mother with two children, who waved shyly at Amelia's bright name tag. As the morning progressed, the stream of customers grew. A teenage cashier trainee in the next lane, Jenna, glanced over with a sympathetic look when a white businesswoman tapped her foot impatiently. "Hurry up, dear," the woman snapped. Jenna shot Amelia a helpless glance, but did nothing. Amelia caught Jenna's eye and gave a small nod, silently acknowledging their shared discomfort. Behind Amelia, the bakery timers dinged regularly, filling the air with the scent of fresh sourdough and cinnamon rolls. Each ding felt like a clock ticking off her worth in the eyes of some customers. Yet, with every slow remark, she focused tighter on her rhythm. Each scan, each bag fold, each polite, "Thank you for shopping with us. Have a great day." She refused to let one person's bias taint her pride in doing the job well. By noon, her arms felt heavy from lifting 50-pound bags of dog food and stacking them carefully in plastic sacks. Her feet ached in the uncomfortable black shoes provided by the company. Still, she welcomed the exhaustion. It meant she had persevered. When Dan walked by, clipboard in hand, he peered over her shoulder at her register total. "Maybe pick up the pace," he offered without looking her in the eye. Amelia tilted her chin up. "Yes, sir," she said, her voice calm but firm. As her lunch break arrived, she packed away her apron and stepped outside. The hot air felt suddenly freeing. She checked her reflection in the bus window, eyes determined, shoulders squared. Despite the subtle and not-so-subtle messages telling her she didn't belong, Amelia felt a quiet fire grow inside her. Today had tested her resolve, but she had stood her ground. Tomorrow, she promised herself, she would be even stronger. Sunlight slanted through the dusty backroom window as Amelia arrived for her second week at Midwest Fresh. The linoleum floor felt colder than the day before, and a knot of anxiety tightened in her chest. She'd hoped that after surviving her first day's subtle barbs, things would improve. But from the moment she clocked in, it was clear that prejudice had deeper roots here than she'd realized. Dan Miller met her at the time clock with a curt nod. "Your schedule's changed," he announced, handing her a new slip. She scanned the hours, 5 late-night shifts, when foot traffic was minimal, and the store felt deserted except for the skeleton crew, and the occasional loaf of bread destined to spoil. "We need you to cover the 7 p.m. to 3 a.m. slot," Dan said without explanation. His tone made it clear this wasn't a favor, but a punishment cloaked in the language of business needs. Amelia forced a smile. "Of course," she said, though her stomach sank. Weeks ago, she'd signed up eagerly for day shifts. Nights meant a drop in pay incentive bonuses and a sense of invisibility among the late-hour stalkers and managers who seldom interacted with customers. Worse, the late shift was the easiest way to mask one's underperformers. Out of sight, out of mind. Her first night shift began with Jenna, the trainee cashier, tagging along until midnight. Jenna's white skin and perky confidence shone in contrast to Amelia's guarded composure. When the store closed and the last customer slid home, Dan retreated to his office, leaving Amelia alone on the floor. Stalkers stacked shelves silently, their eyes averted when she passed. Even Margot, who once whispered "slowpoke" under her breath, now glared at Amelia through the glass of the manager's office, as if daring her to make a mistake. Denied access to new training modules on the touchscreen register, modules every other cashier used to improve scanning speed, Amelia found herself improvising. She watched Jenna's quick fingers move across the keys, memorizing the rhythm of shortcut buttons and price override codes in her mental ledger. Each unanswered request for the training code felt like a deliberate blockade. "Not for you," the store's walls seemed to whisper. By the third night, the fatigue began to seep into her bones. Her back ached from bending between aisles. Her hands trembled from hours of repetitive scanning and bagging. Once, a customer with a stroller and heavy grocery haul commented, "You're really taking your time, aren't you?" Her voice carried that familiar edge of impatience. Amelia offered her sweetest smile and apologized, though apologizing for doing her job felt like a betrayal of self-respect. During a brief lull, she slipped into the manager's office to fetch extra register tape and found a pile of pay stub adjustment forms marked "No Show" beside her name, despite her perfect attendance record. On the wall hung a motivational poster, "Teamwork makes the dream work," featuring a diverse group of hands clasped in unity. Amelia let out a bitter laugh. Inside, the words read more like, "All are equal, except some." That night, she retreated to her small apartment and replayed every slight, every diverted glance, every denied opportunity. Anger mingled with exhaustion, but beneath it all stirred determination. She would not let their prejudice define her competence. After hours of poring over online cashier tutorials, she began designing her own drills. Scan 10 cans in under 15 seconds. Bag a full cart in 1 minute. She recorded herself on her phone, tracking her speed and accuracy obsessively. Each morning, before the sun rose, she ran through her regimen until the numbers improved, until she could outpace every cashier on the floor. By the end of the week, when Dan peered over her register total and remarked, "Better, but let's keep pushing," Amelia felt a quiet triumph. She no longer carried the weight of the unspoken accusations. The shadow of prejudice still lingered in the corners of the break room and in the hushed gossip of her colleagues. But she'd found a way to shine through it. And in that faint glow of self-belief, she realized this battle was only beginning. Amelia arrived early on Friday morning, determined to get to the bottom of the strange figures she'd noticed. The fluorescent lights in the break room hummed overhead as she slid into a cracked vinyl chair at the long metal table. Around her, colleagues chatted about weekend plans, completely oblivious to the storm brewing in Amelia's mind. She pulled out a small notebook, its pages already filled with hastily scribbled numbers and dates, and set it next to her well-worn ledger of printed receipts. After punching in, she stole away to the back office under the pretext of refilling her register tape. There, half hidden by dusty file boxes, sat the main terminal where supervisors generated end-of-day reports. Amelia's pulse quickened as she logged in with her own credentials. Credentials that technically shouldn't grant her access, but miraculously still worked. She navigated to the daily summary screen and opened last week's reports side by side, Monday through Thursday. Her eyes darted between the columns of total sales, cash collected, and card transactions. Her heart sank when she saw the pattern. Each night, card sales showed up as negative returns immediately after midnight, then rebounded into the next morning's totals. The suspicious totals always added up to roughly $10,000, give or take a few hundred, vanishing in the dark of night before staff arrived. She flipped to the register audit logs and noted that manager Dan Miller's login appeared at exactly 12:02 a.m. on each of those days. Amelia reached for her notebook and began transcribing the figures by hand, as if copying a secret code. Line 1. Monday, July 7th. Card sales, $48,732.34. Returns, $9,872.50 in Tuesday, July 8th. Card sales, $51,020.11. Returns, $10,193.38. Her pen scratched urgently across the page. She then cross-referenced customer receipts from her own register. Dozens of happy shoppers, none of whom had actually returned items. The software marked phantom returns for high-value purchases: TVs, designer cookware sets, bulk wine orders, nearly always paid by card. Working behind the scenes felt exhilarating and terrifying. Amelia knew that if she were caught, her access would be revoked, or worse. She might be accused of tampering herself. Yet each discovery fueled her resolve. She created a simple spreadsheet on her personal laptop, outside the store network, entering dates, times, transaction IDs, and the username DMILLER under authorized. By as dusk fell, she slipped the laptop into her backpack and prepared to head home, her shoulders heavy with the weight of her findings. But without warning, her phone buzzed. A text message from manager Dan, sent to the entire staff group chat. Reminder: mandatory all-hands meeting back office at 7 p.m. sharp. Amelia's stomach clenched. He'd discovered her absence from the terminal. Or worse, he wanted to confront everyone about something. She took a deep breath, pocketed her wallet and notebook, and walked onto the sales floor with her usual calm smile. Deep in her mind, she vowed, no matter what happened at that meeting, she would protect her evidence. Every line in her notebook and every spreadsheet cell was a lifeline to the truth, and she intended to use it to expose the rot hidden behind the registers. The fluorescent bulbs overhead buzzed as Amelia slipped through the backroom door, her notebook tucked under one arm. She'd spent the afternoon replaying every possible outcome of the 7 p.m. meeting: a reprimand, a warning, or worst of all, immediate termination. The stale air reeked faintly of burnt coffee and industrial cleaners. Around the folding table sat the department heads, Dan Miller at the head, Margot to his right, and Eddie Thompson, the assistant manager, to his left. Both Margot and Eddie, brilliant white smiles masking suspicion, exchanged a quick glance as Amelia entered. Dan cleared his throat. Thanks for coming, everyone. We've had some anomalies in our nightly figures. Card returns, late-night discrepancies, you name it. I want to remind you all, tampering with reports is a serious offense. His eyes flicked to Amelia and her heart hammered. She noticed Eddie's jaw tighten. His crisp white shirt seemed suddenly hostile in the harsh light. Margot leaned forward, voice sugar-coated but sharp. Look, this is a small store with thin margins. We can't afford mistakes. So if anyone here thinks it's okay to fiddle the books, she tapped the table for emphasis, think again. Amelia's grip on her notebook tightened. The accusation hung in the air, unspoken but clear. Someone was hunting for a scapegoat. When no one spoke up, Dan turned to Amelia. Amelia, you've only been here a few weeks, but you've shown initiative. I need you to proofread these nightly logs. See if you can spot any errors. If you find something, bring it to me. His tone was both challenge and trap. Amelia blinked, holding her composure. Yes, sir, she said softly. That night, Amelia sat alone in the dimly lit office, the meeting's tension still fresh. She opened the folder Dan had piled before her, stack after stack of printouts, and felt the weight of each page as proof of her charge. The first sheet looked ordinary, but as she flipped through, she saw the same pattern. Phantom returns, logged at 12:02 a.m., always under Dan's credentials. Her pulse raced. This was her chance to confront the culprits directly. but also the moment they might snatch her evidence away. She copied the suspect lines into her notebook, double-checking transaction IDs and cross-referencing her own spreadsheet. After hours of study, she had enough to map every penny diverted over the past month. Just as she gathered her papers, the door clicked. Dan stood in the frame, arms crossed. His eyes were dark. "What are you doing here so late?" he asked, stepping in. Amelia froze, papers clutched to her chest. "Working," she replied evenly, forcing herself not to flinch. "You asked me to check these." Dan's expression hardened. He snatched the top sheet. "You know, Amelia, it's not typical for a cashier to have this level of access or curiosity." He rifled through her notebook. "Is this yours?" His finger tapped the pages where she'd recorded her findings. Panic flared, but her voice stayed calm. "Yes, sir, I thought—" Before she could finish, Eddie's voice crackled through Dan's walkie-talkie. A late-night delivery truck had overturned at the loading dock. "I'll handle this," Dan said, handing back her notebook with surprising gentleness. "Go home, Amelia. We'll finish tomorrow." Outside, the Chicago night air was frigid and crisp. Amelia pressed her notebook to her chest, recognizing the tightrope she now walked. She'd survived the first direct threat, but the danger had only grown sharper. As city lights flickered against the skyline, she tucked her findings into a locked compartment of her backpack. She would need allies, and she would need proof. But most of all, she would need courage to confront those who believed their prejudice gave them immunity. Tonight, the shadow of danger loomed closer than ever, but Amelia's resolve burned brighter still. The morning sun was barely cresting the rooftops when Amelia slipped into the back office, her backpack heavier than ever. Inside, she placed her laptop on the cluttered desk beside Dan Miller's abandoned papers from the previous night. Her fingers trembled as she opened the file containing her meticulously crafted spreadsheet, complete with highlighted discrepancies, time-stamped screenshots, and annotated receipts. She had spent the last 3 days refining it, ensuring there was no possible challenge to her numbers. At exactly 9 a.m., she tapped out a brief email to investigative reporter Carla Nguyen at the Chicago Tribune, attaching a summary document. "I believe I have uncovered systematic embezzlement totaling over $5 million, she wrote. "All evidence is documented. I'm available to meet today. Please treat this as urgent and confidential." She hit send before she could second-guess herself, heart hammering in her chest. 2 hours later, a quiet knock sounded on the back room door. Carla entered, camera bag slung over one shoulder, notebook at the ready. She was in her early 30s with sharp eyes and an unflappable demeanor. "Amelia," she asked, extending a hand. Amelia stood and offered her folder. Carla flipped through the pages, her expression shifting from professional curiosity to stunned disbelief. "Where did you get all this?" Carla murmured, glancing at a chart showing nightly $10,000 returns logged under DMILLER. Amelia swallowed. "I worked the registers," she explained softly. "I noticed the phantom returns, checked the audit logs, and traced every entry back to Dan Miller's midnight logon." Carla raised an eyebrow. "Dan Miller? The store manager?" Amelia nodded, her throat tight. Carla set to work, cross-checking a few entries on her tablet, then looked up with steady resolve. "This is huge. I'll corroborate with our own inquiries and file a story by tomorrow morning. Are you ready for this fallout?" Amelia drew in a shaky breath. "I didn't do this for attention," she said. "I did it because it was wrong." Carla smiled, closing her notebook. "Truth matters, Amelia. Let's make sure everyone knows it." When the article went live at 7 a.m. the next day, its headline hammered across social media. "Midwest Fresh Manager Accused of $5 million. Embezzlement. Whistleblower Exposes Scheme." The piece laid out the timeline of nightly returns, the spike in card refunds between 12:02 a.m. and 12:10 a.m., and the unmistakable pattern of manipulation under Miller's credentials. It quoted anonymous sources from within the company, as well as a statement from Amelia herself. Instantly, the supermarket's website crashed under the load of outraged visitors. By noon, the state attorney's office had opened an official investigation. Union representatives descended on the store, offering legal aid to any employee willing to testify. Local news cameras set up outside the sliding doors as executives in crisp suits emerged to face reporters' questions. Across the country, retail workers saw the scandal as a rallying cry. If a single cashier could unearth millions in stolen funds, what other injustices were being swept under the rug? Back in the break room, Amelia watched the televised press conference from the safety of the staff lounge. When asked about the allegations, the company's regional director said, "We take these claims seriously and are cooperating fully with authorities." It was a far cry from the dismissive attitude she'd encountered just days before. As Amelia sipped her lukewarm coffee, relief and exhaustion washed over her. The truth was finally out, and it was louder than any prejudice she'd faced. That evening, as she locked up the register for the first time without fear of false accusations, a text from Carla buzzed in. "Thank you for your courage. You've changed more than just this store." Amelia closed her eyes and allowed herself a small, genuine smile. Against all odds, against every whispered doubt and cruel stereotype, she had exposed the rot at the heart of the company. And in doing so, she had given hope to countless others who would now dare to stand up too. When the dust settled on the embezzlement scandal, Amelia found herself at a crossroads. She'd exposed a $5 million theft and earned the gratitude of colleagues and the wider community. But she also knew that without systemic change, other workers would suffer silently. One late evening, she sat at her kitchen table surrounded by empty coffee mugs and stacks of notebook pages. On one side lay her detailed notes on payroll discrepancies. On the other, printed articles about grassroots labor movements. With her laptop open to a blank document, Amelia typed a single word at the top of the page: fair pay. From idea to prototype. Inspired by the way she'd tracked phantom returns line by line, Amelia sketched out an app that would give every retail and service worker transparent, real-time oversight of their hours, breaks, tips, and bonuses. She envisioned notifications when payroll entries changed, an easy way to report anomalies, and anonymous group petitions to management. Over the next 2 weeks, she reached out to contacts she'd made during the investigation. Jenna, the trainee cashier who had shown her support, Carla Nguyen, who connected her to a volunteer tech meetup, and Marcus, a software engineer she'd met at a local community center. Together, they converted her sketches into wireframes using free online tools, dragging and dropping interface elements, defining user flows, and mapping data fields for clock-in times, manager approvals, and payroll summaries, building the team and securing resources. With a basic prototype in hand, Amelia and Marcus pitched the idea to a local nonprofit that supports worker rights. The organization offered a small grant to develop a minimum viable product, MVP. Amelia recruited 2 more volunteers: Sophia, a UI/UX designer passionate about accessibility, and Jamal, a marketing student eager to amplify labor justice stories. Working nights and weekends in Marcus's modest home office, they wrote code, drafted privacy policies, and tested early builds on outdated smartphones, rescued from electronics recycling bins. Despite occasional crashes and integration headaches, the team celebrated every milestone: first user login, successful push notification, and generation of a clean payroll report. Beta testing in the real world. By early spring, Fairpay's Chicago beta launched in 3 pilot stores: a neighborhood deli, a boutique clothing shop, and a small grocery. Amelia visited each site after hours, guiding employees through installation and demonstrating how to photograph time cards and scan QR codes at the clock-in terminal. Workers marveled at the instant alerts. Your shift length has been adjusted from 8 to 7.5 hours, or overtime rate not applied. A deli cashier used the Report Issue button to flag a missing weekend bonus, prompting her manager to correct it the same day. Word of these quick fixes spread, and within 2 weeks, sign-ups tripled as employees urged their coworkers to join. Partnerships and passion. Encouraged by the pilot's success, Amelia approached the United Retail Workers Union, URWU. She presented usage analytics, over 500 shifts logged, 120 issues reported, and an average correction time of 3 days. The URWU offered to integrate Fairpay into their member benefits package and to feature it at upcoming labor fairs. At URW's annual conference in Indianapolis, Amelia delivered a keynote demonstration showing how collective data could empower negotiations for fair scheduling and hazard pay. Delegates from 5 states signed letters of intent to pilot fair pay in their regions, and a crowdfunding campaign launched to raise funds for full-time developers, refining the vision and scaling up. Back in Chicago, the core team held monthly hack and help sessions at a co-working space, inviting retail workers to suggest new features. Automated tip pooling, GPS-verified breaks, and multilingual support. Each suggestion went through rapid prototyping and user testing. By summer, FairPay was live on both the App Store and Google Play, boasting over 10,000 downloads. Local press highlighted how one rural farm supply store used FairPay data to negotiate hazard pay premiums during a blistering heatwave. Amelia's inbox overflowed with stories of corrected underpayments and newfound confidence among workers. A movement takes flight. As FairPay's community grew, so did its impact. Workers in 6 states used the app to set up collective grievances, resulting in new overtime policies at major regional chains. Labor advocates praised FairPay as the first digital tool to level the playing field between hourly employees and corporate payroll systems. At a national tech conference in New York, Amelia joined a panel on technology for social good, sharing the stage with nonprofit leaders and corporate allies interested in ethical labor practices. FairPay's tagline, "Your work, your data, your voice," became a rallying cry. By the end of the year, what began as a single cashier's quest for fairness had blossomed into a nationwide platform empowering hundreds of thousands of workers. For Amelia, FairPay was more than an app. It was proof that enduring change comes when data, technology, and human courage unite. As she closed her laptop that December night, she smiled at the screen, showing thousands of active users. The fight against injustice was far from over. But for the first time, it felt like it was no longer David versus Goliath. It was an army armed with truth. When the calendar flipped to the new year, FairPay had grown beyond Amelia's wildest expectations. She arrived at the Midwest Fresh store one brisk January morning, not as a cashier, but as a guest of honor. The sliding glass doors opened to reveal a banner stretched across the entrance. "Welcome, FairPay founder Amelia Jordan." A small crowd of employees, many of them familiar faces from her first days, gathered in the produce aisle, clapping and cheering. A changed workplace. Inside the break room, the stale motivational posters had been replaced with laminated FairPay success stories. Before and after graphs showing corrected hours, employee testimonials praising transparent scheduling, and photographs of smiling staff alongside Amelia herself. Dan Miller was gone, dismissed after the embezzlement conviction, and in his place stood a new manager, Elena Cruz, the first Latina director in the region. Elena stepped forward and handed Amelia a folded letter. "From all of us," she said. "Thank you for holding us accountable." Amelia unfolded it, dozens of signatures underneath a single line. "You made this place better." Honoring the front lines that afternoon, Amelia led a workshop for the store's employees. Around long tables, she demonstrated new FairPay features, group petitions for break room upgrades, SMS alerts for holiday shift opportunities, and an option to anonymously nominate coworkers for FairPay Champion Awards. Cashiers, shelf stockers, and night shift janitors all leaned in, eyes bright with curiosity. When a young stock clerk asked how to set up a recurring report to detect missing breaks, Amelia guided him through the steps with gentle patience. This time, no one questioned her competence, only admired her expertise. A broader movement. Word of the store's transformation spread quickly through regional retail networks. Within months, 10 more Midwest Fresh locations had integrated FairPay into their standard employee onboarding. Amelia traveled to Detroit to meet with union leaders, flew to Phoenix for a speaking engagement at a national labor conference, and Skyped into a virtual summit for European worker rights activists. Everywhere she went, she heard the same refrain. "Because of what you did, we no longer feel powerless." Personal reflections. Late one evening, Amelia stood on her apartment balcony, the city lights of Chicago twinkling below. She thought back to that first intimidating morning behind the register, to every whispered insult and locked door. She felt the ache in her back from long shifts, the sting of ignorant remarks, and she felt proud, not just for exposing the fraud, but for turning her frustration into a force for good. Clutching her Fair Pay mug, she realized that the courage she'd summoned wasn't something born of heroism, but of relentless conviction, inspiring new voices. Months later, Amelia received an unexpected invitation to mentor a cohort of young women of color at a tech accelerator in Atlanta. She flew down and spent 2 weeks leading workshops on ethical app design, data privacy, and community-centered development. When a bright-eyed teenager asked how to handle skepticism in male-dominated boardrooms, Amelia shared her own story, with its setbacks, late-night coding sessions, and the moment she risked everything to send that first email to Carla Nguyen. By the end of the session, the aspiring founders were not only building apps, they were building confidence, a legacy of fairness. Back in Chicago, the original Midwest Fresh store held a small ceremony to dedicate a new Fair Pay corner in the break room. A tall bookcase stocked with labor rights pamphlets, a touchscreen kiosk for Fair Pay tutorials, and a bulletin board for employee suggestions. Above it, a simple plaque read, "In gratitude to Amelia Jordan, who proved that one voice, armed with truth, can change the world." As the store's new employees filed in for their first training session, under the banner of openness and respect, Amelia slipped away into the winter twilight. She paused on the sidewalk, looking back at the glow spilling from the entrance. A smile tugged at her lips. The fight for justice would never truly end, she knew. But tonight, she allowed herself to celebrate. A victory not just for herself, but for every worker whose story had yet to be told. And in that quiet moment, she felt certain that the best chapters were still to come.